There isn't really a wrong way to explore cities. But when we visit a new city, we do try to optimize for seeing as much of it as we can, because we like to leave places feeling like we wouldn't need to visit again, even though we might want to. So, what's the best way to explore a new city if you want to get the most out of your visit? Walking, driving, cycling, or taking transit? We've taken some trips over the past few years covering places as different as Newfoundland, Vancouver, San Francisco, and the Netherlands. And we have opinions.
Walking is the simplest and most direct way to explore a new city, and on every trip we do a lot of walking, often covering more than 20 kilometers or 12 miles per day. The magic of walking is that you have perfect freedom. You can go in any direction. You can stop at any time and take some pictures, sit down, go to a cafe, or do whatever you want. You have nothing to park, no transit route to memorize or follow. You're also going at a pace that's really conducive to seeing things. You do need an urban environment that's pleasant or at least possible to walk in, but there's a basic standard for this that most cities do offer. On our trip to California, we found that many roads and crossings, especially in Berkeley and Oakland, weren't as pleasant or safe for pedestrians as we'd like, but you could still expect sidewalks everywhere. And we didn't fear for our safety in the way that we probably would if we tried to bike on some of these roads. The biggest problem with walking, obviously, is that there's a limit to how long and how far you can walk, even for younger people who are pretty used to walking.
If you expected us to be completely negative on vacationing by car, you'd be wrong. We wouldn't want to rely on a car for basic needs day to day, but road trips here and there can be fun, and cars can give you access to more rural and remote areas that it can be hard to replicate with any other mode, depending on where you're going. On our recent trip to Newfoundland, we drove to some provincial parks and national historic sites with a friend, and a few years ago we drove the Cabot Trail in Cape Breton Highlands National Park, also on the east coast of Canada, which we highly recommend during the fall colors. The problem with cars comes, of course, when they collide with cities. Cars can be a good way to get to a city if necessary, but they're usually a pretty bad way of experiencing the city itself. You're going too fast and you're usually traveling through less appealing environments like highways or arterials, where there's not a lot of life.
Cycling is probably the best way to explore a city, in an ideal world. Bikes combine some of the speed and mobility of cars with most of the flexibility of walking, especially because you can easily park your bike and become a pedestrian if you want, certainly more easily than parking a car to walk around for a bit. The biggest challenge is that not that many places are bike-friendly. Even in North America, most cities do have a walkable core, and you have to get pretty far into the suburbs before walking is truly horrific. But outside of Denmark or the Netherlands, most cities just don't have anything approaching a complete bike network, where you can casually bike in any direction you want, and know that you can expect bike infrastructure, in the same way that you can walk in any direction in most cities, and be pretty confident that there will be sidewalks. We saw this cycling around Vancouver and San Francisco, which have pretty good bike networks by North American standards, but we still had to spend a lot of time planning our routes. We didn't have the same spontaneity that we had when visiting the Netherlands. Another city we visited recently, St. John's, Newfoundland, had virtually no bike infrastructure at all. We did see some brave souls on bikes, but we had no desire to join them, and we stuck to walking ourselves.
Another big challenge for seeing a city by bike, even if there's good bike infrastructure, is finding a bike to use. We've traveled on an intercity bus with our full-size bikes down with the luggage, and it was kind of a miracle that our bikes survived. You can also get a folding bike to take on the bus, train, or in your car, although the 20-inch wheel models that we have don't fold down quite as small as we'd like. It works, but it's not as convenient as if we had a smaller wheeled Brompton. Once you get to the city, most places have bike share programs accessible to tourists, but the time limit, typically 30 or 45 minutes, makes them more useful to locals and visitors who know the city, rather than tourists who want to casually bike around, who don't want to be always watching the clock and hunting for stations. Also, the annual passes for bike share are by far the best deal, much better than paying per ride, but they don't make sense for short-term tourists. Montreal and Antwerp have good weekly pass options too, but Toronto and Vancouver don't. And finally, you can also get traditional rental bikes for the day. In the Netherlands, we rented bikes from our hotels, and in San Francisco we were, surprisingly enough, able to rent bikes from the Transit Authority at their downtown Berkeley parking garage bike station. For some reason, they didn't come with kickstands, a big surprise because they weren't mountain bikes or anything. Day rentals like this are the most convenient option, but also the most expensive, at $20 to $30 a day. It's hard to justify that cost every single day, which is fine. On our trips, we mix walking and cycling days, and it helps us to cover more ground overall, because walking and biking tire out somewhat different muscles and movement patterns.
The final option for exploring cities is transit, which is usually more available than bike infrastructure. There are a lot more good transit cities out there than good cycling cities. Transit isn't as flexible as cycling because you can't follow the exact speed or route you want, but it covers medium to longer distances better. And if the city you're visiting has a day or a week pass, you can hop on and hop off without worrying about the cost of each ride, bringing you closer to the flexibility of cycling, especially on street-running transit like a tram or a streetcar with lots of stops. We do find ourselves not using buses all that often in new cities, though. As a visitor, the schedules and routes aren't as easy to understand, compared to trams and especially rapid transit, especially when you don't have data on your phone because that's roaming and you don't want to spend the money.
Elevated transit like the Vancouver SkyTrain or San Francisco BART is always a treat for its views of the skyline, neighborhoods, and natural features like the mountains. Although taking pictures or videos through the windows of the train usually doesn't work out quite as nicely as you hope. Sometimes you can get good shots of the city from a platform, although sometimes your platform is in the middle of the highway. Underground metros or subways don't give you the same views, obviously, but in a lot of cities the metro is itself a destination that you want to see for the architecture and art, and just because it's an iconic part of the city. Another good use of transit on a trip is to save money or get a bigger hotel room by staying outside the main city and taking transit in. For our trip to San Francisco, we stayed in Berkeley, with a 30-minute BART connection to the city. This was only a good idea though because we had things we wanted to see and do in Berkeley too. If at all possible, we avoid staying in hotels off by the airport or industrial areas of the city, even if they're a really good deal, because we don't want to have to do a long commute to get anywhere we would want to see. It's fine to commute in for some things, but it's much better if you can also casually walk around and see things in the morning or evening without having to make a whole trip out of it.
Obviously, all of this is caveated by the fact that walking and cycling are not just how we get around in our daily lives. They're also two of our main hobbies, so your mileage may vary. There's nothing wrong with seeing a city from a tour bus if you want or need a more relaxing setup. You might also just be less interested in city exploration. Lots of people visit places for the food or the beaches instead. Thanks for watching through to the end of the video, and a special thanks to our supporters on Patreon.